The morning sun filtered through the canopy of the Smithsonian National Zoo in Washington, D.C., casting dappled shadows on the winding paths that snaked through the exhibits. It was a crisp autumn day, the kind where the air carried the faint scent of fallen leaves and distant coffee from the visitor center. Jack Harlan, a seasoned zookeeper with 20 years under his belt, made his usual rounds in the Asia Trail section. At 45, Jack was the epitome of quiet reliability. Broad-shouldered from years of hauling feed and enclosures, his salt and pepper hair tucked under a faded zoo cap, and a perpetual squint from staring into enclosures that mimicked dense bamboo forests. Jack had always felt a kinship with the animals here, especially the giant pandas. They weren't native to DCI, of course. These were diplomatic loans from China, symbols of international goodwill that drew crowds from across the country. Mei Ling and her cub, Xiao Bao, had arrived 2 years ago, and Jack had been part of the team hand-raising the little one after complications during birth. Xiao Bao was a fluffy black and white bundle of mischief, not yet 2 years old, with eyes that sparkled like polished obsidian. He was the zoo's star, his playful tumbles captured in viral videos that racked up millions of views. But today, as Jack approached the enclosure, something felt off. The bamboo groves rustled unnaturally, and there was no sign of the usual morning routine. No Xiao Bao scampering after his mother or Mei Ling lazily munching on shoots. Jack's radio crackled to life. "Harlan, you at the Panda exhibit? We've got a breach alert." His heart sank. Breaches were rare, but with pandas they were a nightmare. Protocol demanded immediate lockdown, and the press would swarm like bees if word got out. He quickened his pace, boots crunching on gravel, and pushed through the service gate. Inside the enclosure, the air was thick with the earthy smell of disturbed soil. The inner fence was intact, but the outer perimeter, a chain-link barrier topped with electric wire, had a section sagging low, as if something heavy had leaned against it. Mei Ling paced anxiously in the far corner, her massive form a stark contrast to the tiny gap near the base. Jack scanned the ground. Faint paw prints, too small for an adult, trailed toward the tree line beyond the zoo's boundary. The Asia Trail backed up against Rock Creek Park, a sprawling urban forest that blurred the line between captivity and wild. "Xiao Bao," Jack muttered under his breath, his voice a low rumble of worry. He radioed it in, keeping his tone steady. "Possible cub escape. Tracks heading north into the creek area. Alert security and prep the retrieval team." The response came fast. Veterinarians on standby, zoo director en route. But Jack didn't wait. Grabbing a crate of fresh bamboo and a soft blanket from the supply shed, he slipped through the gate. The zoo's edge met the park's dense underbrush, where maples and oaks formed a natural barrier. It was against protocol to go solo, but Xiao Bao was like a kid to him, and every minute counted. The forest swallowed him quickly, the sounds of the zoo fading to birdsong and the rustle of leaves. About 50 yards in, Jack heard it, a soft, whimpering chuff that pierced the quiet. He froze, then pushed through a thicket of ferns. There, huddled against the gnarled root of an old oak, was Xiao Bao. The cub's fur was matted with dirt, his usual playful energy replaced by wide-eyed fear. He looked up at Jack, those dark eyes locking on, and in a blur of instinct, he lunged forward, tiny claws digging into Jack's pant leg. The keeper knelt slowly, heart pounding, as the panda clung like a lifeline, his small body trembling against the denim. "It's okay, buddy," Jack whispered, wrapping the blanket around him gently. Xiao Bao's grip tightened, a desperate hold that spoke of terror Jack couldn't yet understand. How had the cub gotten out? And why run into the woods instead of staying near the familiar sense of home? Jack lifted him carefully, the weight light but insistent, and started back toward the zoo. But as they moved, a low growl echoed from the shadows ahead, not animal, but mechanical, like an engine idling in the distance. Before the story goes deeper, make sure to subscribe for more narratives like this. Jack paused, ears straining. Rock Creek Park was no stranger to joggers and dog walkers, but this time of morning, it should have been empty. The growl grew louder, accompanied by the snap of twigs under tires. He adjusted Xiao Bao in his arms, the cub's whimpers turning to soft cries against his chest. Pushing through the brush, Jack emerged onto a narrow service trail that wound deeper into the park. There, partially hidden by overhanging branches, sat a battered pickup truck, its engine rumbling low. The vehicle was unmarked, caked in mud that suggested off-road travel, and two men stood nearby, their backs to him as they rummaged through the bed. One was burly, with a tattoo snaking up his neck, barking orders in a thick accent that Jack couldn't place. Eastern European, maybe. The other, slimmer and fidgety, held a large net and what looked like a tranquilizer gun. Jack's stomach twisted. Poachers? In D.C., it seemed impossible, but pandas were worth millions on the black market, their parts a grim currency in illegal trade. Xiaobao must have slipped through during a feeding distraction right into their path. The men hadn't spotted him yet, but the truck's open tailgate revealed crates, dark ventilated boxes that reeked of fear, sweat, and confinement. Jack backed away slowly, but a branch cracked under his boot. The burly man spun, eyes narrowing. "Hey, who's there?" Jack bolted. Xiaobao clutched tight, the forest blurring into a green haze. Branches whipped at his face, roots threatening to trip him, but adrenaline carried him forward. The men's shouts followed, heavy footsteps pounding the earth. "Get the gun." "It's the cub." He burst out of the tree line near the zoo's perimeter fence, lungs burning, and slammed the emergency code on the access panel. The gate buzzed open just as the poachers crested the rise behind him. Security lights flared to life, and zoo staff poured out, radios blaring. Jack thrust Xiaobao into the arms of Dr. Elena Vasquez, the head vet, who whisked him toward the medical bay. "He's okay." "But check for injuries," Jack gasped, turning to face the intruders as police sirens wailed in the distance. The men skidded to a halt at the fence, curses flying, before piling back into their truck and peeling away into the park's depths. Jack slumped against the wall, the weight of what almost happened crashing down. Xiaobao's cling to his leg had saved them both. But the dark forest held secrets far more sinister than a simple escape. News vans were already gathering at the zoo's entrance, reporters hungry for the story of the miracle cub. Little did the world know, this was just the beginning. The shocking revelations from that shadowy pursuit would unravel a global ring, exposing corruption that reached from D.C. boardrooms to remote Chinese mountains. But for now, Jack could only watch as Xiaobao's enclosure was secured, the cub's trusting eyes meeting his through the glass, a silent bond forged in the wild heart of the city. The sterile hum of fluorescent lights filled the veterinary exam room at the Smithsonian National Zoo, where Dr. Elena Vasquez worked with practiced efficiency. Xiaobao lay on the padded table, his small chest rising and falling in shallow rhythms under the soft glow of monitoring equipment. The cub's fur, still dusted with forest debris, had been gently brushed clean, but his eyes darted nervously, searching for Jack. The keeper hovered in the doorway, arms crossed, his face etched with the kind of exhaustion that came from staring down danger and winning by a hair. Elena glanced up from her tablet, her dark hair pulled back in a no-nonsense ponytail. At 38, she was a rising star in wildlife medicine, her Mexican-American roots fueling a passion for conservation that had brought her from veterinary school in California to this high-stakes world of endangered species. He's stable, Jack. No broken bones, just some scrapes and dehydration. The tranq dart they must have prepped for didn't touch him, thank God. She injected a mild sedative to keep him calm, her voice softening. But he's stressed. Pandas bond hard. Losing sight of you out there probably scared him more than the escape. Jack nodded, stepping closer to stroke Xiaobao's paw. The cub's claws, usually playful instruments for climbing, had left faint tears in his jeans, a reminder of that desperate cling in the woods. I should have seen the signs sooner. The fence sagged last week. Maintenance was supposed to fix it. Guilt gnawed at him, mixing with the adrenaline crash. He'd raised Xiaobao from a pink hairless newborn, bottle-feeding him through those fragile first months when Mei Ling's milk didn't come in strong enough. The cub wasn't just an animal. He was family, a fuzzy extension of the life Jack had built after his divorce 5 years back, when the zoo became his anchor. Outside, the zoo buzzed with controlled chaos. Director Harlan, no relation to Jack, though the coincidence often sparked jokes, paced the admin building, fielding calls from the State Department. Panda loans were diplomatic tightropes, and a breach like this could strain U.S.-China relations faster than a bad trade deal. "Keep it contained," he barked into his phone, his southern drawl clipped with urgency. Reporters milled at the gates, their cameras trained on the Asia Trail, but security had spun it as a minor containment issue, buying time. By midday, Xiaobao was back in the enclosure, reunited with Mei Ling under heightened surveillance. The mother panda nuzzled her cub protectively, her low grunts a soothing rumble that echoed through the reinforced glass. Jack watched from the viewing platform, a crowd of visitors gathering below, whispering about the Hero Keeper rumors already leaking online. His phone vibrated with texts from colleagues, supportive but laced with questions. What were those guys doing in Rock Creek Park? Poachers in the nation's capital. It sounded like a bad thriller plot, but the truck's mud-caked plates and the net's professional weave screamed organized crime. As the sun dipped lower, casting long shadows over the exhibits, Jack headed to the staff break room for a much-needed coffee. The room smelled of microwaved leftovers and instant brew, a haven of chipped mugs and faded posters urging "Save the Pandas." Sarah Klein, the exhibit coordinator, slid a styrofoam cup his way. She was in her late 20s, with freckles and a quick laugh that lightened the team's long shifts. "You look like hell, Harlan. Sit. Tell me what went down out there." He sank into a plastic chair, recounting the chase in halting details. The truck, the men, Xiaobao's whimpers. Sarah's eyes widened. "Poachers? Here? That's insane. Rock Creek's got trails everywhere. It's not some remote jungle." She pulled up her laptop, fingers flying over the keys. "Let me check the park cams. Metro PD shares some feeds." The screen flickered to life, grainy footage from a trailhead camera time-stamped just after the breach. There it was. The pickup easing into a shaded pull-off, the two men unloading gear. The burly one, Victor something. Sarah zoomed in on a partial plate, gestured animatedly, pointing toward the zoo's direction. "They knew about the pandas," Jack said, voice low. "This wasn't random. Someone tipped them off." Sarah forwarded the clip to the authorities, her brow furrowed. "FBI's already looping in. But Jack, if this is a ring, pandas are like gold in the underworld. Gallbladders, bones, it's barbaric." She paused, glancing at him. "You saved him. Xiaobao's video from this morning, it's blowing up. People are calling you the Panda Whisperer." A faint smile tugged at Jack's lips, but it didn't reach his eyes. The weight of the day pressed on him, stirring memories of his ex-wife Lisa, who'd left partly because his job always came first. Whisperer or not, I can't shake the feeling this isn't over. Those guys peeled out like they had a plan B. That evening, as the zoo closed its gates to the public, Jack volunteered for the night watch. The city lights twinkled beyond the perimeter, DCI's monuments a distant glow against the darkening sky. Rock Creek Park loomed like a living entity, its trails twisting into obscurity where urban grit met untamed green. He patrolled the fence line, flashlight beam cutting through the dusk, ears tuned to every rustle. Xiaobao's enclosure was lit softly, the cub curled against his mother, but Jack's mind raced. Who were those men? Local opportunists, or part of something bigger? His radio crackled around 10 p.m. "Harlan, you copy. Got a tip from park rangers. Suspicious vehicle spotted deeper in the creek, near the old service road." Jack's pulse quickened. Grabbing his keys, he notified security and slipped into his truck, the zoo's floodlights fading in his rear view. The park roads were narrow, potholed from neglect, flanked by dense foliage that whispered secrets in the wind. He drove cautiously, windows down to catch any engine hum, the air thick with the scent of damp earth and pine. Miles in, where the trail narrowed to a dirt path, he spotted it. Another vehicle, sleek and black, pulled off into the underbrush. No plates visible, but the low profile screamed custom. Poacher transport, maybe. Jack killed his lights and eased closer, heart hammering. Voices drifted from the shadows, low and urgent, in that same accented English. "The cub got away, but the keeper saw us. We need to pull back. Wait for the inside man. Inside man? Jack's blood ran cold. He crept forward on foot, sticking to the tree line, the ground soft under his boots. Peering through binoculars, he made out 3 figures around a laptop, maps spread on the hood. One was the slim poacher from earlier, gesturing at a zoo blueprint. Corruption, someone on staff. The implications hit like a gut punch, betrayal in the heart of the institution he trusted. Before he could retreat, headlights pierced the night from the opposite direction. A ranger's SUV probably responding to the same tip. The poachers scattered, engines roaring to life as they vanished into the dark. Jack ducked low, radioing his position, but the encounter left him reeling. This wasn't a lone incident. It was a web. Threads pulling from the zoo's secure world into the forest's hidden threats. As police lights flashed in the distance, Jack wondered how deep it went, and what price Xiaobao's safety would demand next. The dark forest had shown its teeth, and the world was only starting to glimpse the bite. The fluorescent glare of the Metro PD substation cut through the midnight haze as Jack Harlan pulled his truck into the lot, the engine ticking cool under the hood. Rock Creek Park's shadows still clung to his clothes, the scent of wet leaves and adrenaline a stubborn reminder of the night's revelations. He'd given his statement to the responding officers on site, but Detective Maria Ruiz insisted he come in for a full debrief. At 42, Ruiz was a no-frills investigator with sharp eyes and a Bronx accent softened by years in D.C. Her desk cluttered with case files on everything from petty thefts to wildlife trafficking rings. Jack settled into a metal chair across from her, the room's stale coffee aroma doing little to ease the knot in his gut. Xiaobao was safe back at the zoo, under round-the-clock cameras and a doubled security detail, but sleep was a distant thought. You saw blueprints? Ruiz leaned forward, tapping a notepad. Of the zoo? That's not amateur hour. Walk me through it again. He recounted the scene in the underbrush, the poachers huddled over the laptop, the slim guy's frantic gestures at the glowing screen, the mention of an inside man. Ruiz's pen scratched steadily, her expression unchanging, but Jack caught the flicker of concern in her eyes. We've had whispers of this for months, she said finally, sliding a folder across the desk. Photos spilled out, similar trucks, seized crates from busts in New York and Miami, even a grainy shot of the burly poacher, identified as Viktor Kozlov, a known operative in Eastern European smuggling networks. Pandas are the holy grail. A single cub's bile can fetch 6 figures on the black market. Traditional medicine, collectors, you name it. But hitting the National Zoo? That's ballsy. Diplomatic fallout alone could tank relations. Jack flipped through the images, his fingers tightening on a close-up of Kozlov's tattoo, a coiled serpent that matched what he'd glimpsed. They weren't just after Xiaobao. That setup screamed coordinated. Someone fed them the fence weak spot, the feeding schedule. Betrayal burned in his chest. The zoo was a family, built on trust and late-night shifts. Who? A low-level staffer desperate for cash, or higher up, chasing a payout that dwarfed their salary? Ruiz nodded, closing the folder. FBI's taking the lead at dawn. Interagency mess with the State Department breathing down our necks. For now, you're on lockdown. No solo patrols, Harlan. These guys don't play nice. If they think you ID'd them, you're a loose end. She handed him a burner phone. Call if anything feels off. And keep an eye on that cub. He's not just a pet project anymore. He's Exhibit A in whatever this web is. By 2 a.m., Jack was back at his modest apartment in Georgetown, the historic row houses silent under street lamp glow. The place was sparse, a worn couch, stacks of wildlife journals, a framed photo of Xiaobao's first steps that Lisa had left behind in the divorce. He collapsed onto the bed, but his mind raced, replaying the forest chase. The cub's tiny body pressed against his leg like a talisman. Sleep came in fits, haunted by growls and snapping branches. Morning broke with a relentless buzz from his regular phone. Sarah Klein's voice crackled through, urgent but laced with her usual optimism. Jack, you okay? Elena says Xiaobao's perking up, ate a full stalk of bamboo at feeding. But the director's calling an all-staff meeting. Press is everywhere. They're spinning it as a heroic rescue, but rumors are flying about poachers. He could hear the hum of the zoo in the background, visitors' chatter, the distant roar of lions. He arrived at the admin building by 8 a.m., the parking lot jammed with news vans from CNN to local affiliates. Director Harlan, still no relation, stood at the front of the conference room, his face a mask of strained authority. Flanked by Elena and Security Chief Tom Riley, a grizzled ex-Marine with a buzz cut, he addressed the 30-odd staffers crammed into folding chairs. "This incident is contained, but we're treating it seriously. Enhanced protocols, no unauthorized access, daily fence checks, and full cooperation with law enforcement. Jack, your quick thinking saved the day. Thank you." Murmurs rippled through the room, eyes darting to Jack, who sat in the back, nursing a lukewarm coffee. Sarah squeezed his shoulder as the meeting broke, whispering, "Heard from a ranger buddy. That black SUV from last night. Traced to a rental under a fake name. They're circling." Elena pulled him aside afterward, her vet coat still dusted with fur. "Xiao Bao's asking for you, in his way. Come see him after rounds?" The Asia Trail exhibit thrummed with subdued energy, barriers up to manage the crowd drawn by the buzz. Mei Ling lounged in her pool, but Xiao Bao paced the edge of the viewing glass, his black paws pressing against it as Jack approached. The cub's eyes lit up, a soft chuff escaping as he recognized the familiar scent. Jack knelt, placing his hand on the cool barrier. "Hey, little guy, we're going to keep you safe." Through the glass, their bond felt unbreakable, a quiet defiance against the shadows creeping in. But safety felt illusory. As Jack resumed his rounds, checking the reinforced perimeter, his radio spat static. "Harlan, report to the service gate. Delivery issue." He trudged over, expecting routine feed crates, but found a nondescript van idling, the driver, a wiry man with a clipboard, averting his eyes. "Special order for the Pandas. Sign here." Jack scanned the manifest, bamboo from a supplier in Virginia, but the seals looked tampered, the edges too clean. Instinct prickled. He waved it off. "Hold for inspection. Protocol." The driver shifted, glancing at his watch, and Jack caught a glint of metal in the van's side mirror. A sidearm. Heart racing, he radioed security while circling the vehicle casually. Peering through the tinted window, he spotted it. A duffel bag unzipped just enough to reveal coiled rope and a silenced pistol. Not a delivery, a probe, testing the zoo's vigilance. "Step out of the vehicle," Jack said firmly as Riley's team arrived, badges flashing. The driver bolted, but the gates clanged shut, trapping him. A search turned up more. Encrypted phone, zoo access badge, stolen, but the name on it hit like ice. Belonged to a maintenance tech, fired last month for irregularities. Inside man confirmed. By afternoon, the FBI swarmed the site. Agent Kyle Brennan, a tall, methodical type from Quantico, grilling Jack in a makeshift command post. "This badge traces to a drop in Baltimore. Your poachers are escalating, testing for weaknesses before round 2. Brennan's team mapped connections. Kozlov linked to a syndicate out of Sofia, Bulgaria, with tentacles into U.S. ports. Whispers of a corrupt importer in D.C. Greasing palms for animal shipments disguised as exotic pets. Jack's hands shook as he processed it. The dark forest wasn't just a backdrop. It was a gateway to an underworld thriving in plain sight. Xiao Bao's innocent escape had cracked it open, but closing the lid meant risking everything. As the sun arced toward evening, casting the exhibits in golden light, Jack stood watch over the Panda house, the city's pulse thrumming beyond. The world might see a feel-good tale of a clinging cub, but the shocks were piling up. Betrayals, pursuits, and a ring that could shatter more than one life. And Xiao Bao, oblivious in his play, depended on him to face it head-on. The late afternoon sun slanted through the reinforced bars of the Panda enclosure, painting Xiao Bao's black and white fur in warm stripes as he batted at a dangling enrichment toy. Jack Harlan leaned against the observation deck railing, his calloused hands gripping the metal like an anchor. The zoo's hum, children's laughter from the nearby cheetah exhibit, the occasional squawk from the aviary, felt worlds away from the storm brewing in his mind. The FBI's presence had turned the admin building into a hive of suits and laptops, but out here, It was just him and the cub, separated by glass that suddenly seemed too thin. Elena Vasquez joined him quietly, her vet bag slung over one shoulder, a clipboard tucked under her arm. She'd been running blood work all day, her focus laser-sharp despite the exhaustion lining her face. "Vitals are solid," she said, her voice a soft counterpoint to the tension. "Stress levels dropping now that he's settled. But Jack, you need to go home. Riley's got the night shift covered." She placed a hand on his arm, her touch maternal in a way that reminded him of the long nights they'd pulled together during Xiaobao's early days. He shook his head, eyes fixed on the cub's playful rolls. "Can't. Not until we know who's pulling the strings." The stolen badge incident had lit a fuse. Whispers among the staff painted a picture of paranoia, with everyone eyeing their co-workers like suspects in a bad cop show. Jack's own rounds had doubled, every shadow in the perimeter fence now suspect. The poacher's boldness, the tampered delivery, the fake credentials, suggested they weren't backing off. If anything, the failed grab had made them hungrier. As dusk crept in, casting the Asia Trail in deepening blues, Jack's phone buzzed with a text from Detective Ruiz. "Meet at the creek overlook, 7 p.m. Bring nothing." He glanced at Elena, who nodded grimly. "Go. I'll stay with him." Driving into Rock Creek Park felt like crossing into enemy territory, the familiar trails now laced with menace. The overlook was a quiet spot, a wooden bench overlooking a bend in the stream, where joggers paused for selfies on brighter days. Tonight, it was empty, save for Ruiz's unmarked sedan, its headlights off. She stepped out as he parked, a thermos in hand, coffee, black, the way he'd mentioned during the debrief. "Figured you'd need this," she said, handing it over before leaning against the hood. The water below rushed softly, a natural white noise that muffled their words. "FBI's got leads. That badge? Traced to a fence in Anacostia who deals in zoo swag. Lost items mostly, but the phone from the van? Unlocked it this afternoon. Text to a burner in Chinatown. Coordinates the Panda house exactly." Jack sipped the coffee, its bitterness grounding him. Inside man still in play. The idea gnawed at him, turning colleagues into potential traitors. Sarah had joked about it earlier, her laugh forced as she double-checked exhibit logs, but the humor fell flat. Ruiz pulled out her tablet, swiping to a grainy photo, a middle-aged man in a maintenance jumpsuit smiling at a staff picnic last summer. "Meet Gary Ellis. Fired 3 months ago for inventory discrepancies, bamboo stock missing, tools unaccounted for. Turns out he was selling scraps to a contact in Baltimore. Small time at first, but the texts link him to Kozlov's crew. He fed them the fence weak spot, timed the breach for feeding hour when guards rotate." Jack's jaw tightened, the name hitting close. Gary had been a fixture, the guy who fixed leaky enclosures and shared bad jokes over lunch. He knew Xiaobao's routine. Hell, he bottle-fed him once when I was out sick. Betrayal twisted like a knife. The zoo wasn't just a job, it was a community forged in sweat and shared purpose. Gary's desperation, rumors of gambling debts, a sick kid's medical bills, made it almost understandable, but not forgivable. "We picked him up an hour ago," Ruiz continued, her voice steady. "He's lawyered up, but he's singing already. Says the syndicate approached him 6 months back, promised enough to clear his slate. They wanted an adult panda at first, Mei Ling, but the cub was easier pickings, less security." She paused, eyes scanning the tree line as if expecting shadows to move. "This ring's bigger than D.C. Shipments routed through Virginia ports, disguised as ornamental imports. End buyers in Asia, Europe, private zoos, underground auctions. Xiaobao was prime, young, photogenic, worth a fortune alive or otherwise." The word hung heavy, evoking images Jack shoved down, the cubs trusting Clung in the forest, now tainted by greed. "What now? They coming back?" Ruiz's expression hardened. "Ellis claims they're regrouping. Kozlov's slippery, slipped a tail last night heading toward I-95. FBI's staking out known drops, but if they think the zoo's on alert." She trailed off, the implication clear. Jack's role as the hero keeper made him a target. Viral clips of his rescue were everywhere, turning him into an unwitting poster boy. They parted with a nod, Ruiz slipping him a contact card for emergencies. Back at the zoo by 8 p.m., The gates loomed like sentinels under floodlights. Security had upped patrols, drones humming overhead to scan the perimeter. Jack checked on Xiaobao first, the enclosure a cocoon of soft lights and fresh bamboo. The cub slept curled against Mei Ling, his breathing even, oblivious to the web tightening around him. Elena was packing up, her shift ending. "Ruiz fill you in?" she asked, zipping her bag. "Yeah, Gary." The name tasted bitter. She sighed, rubbing her temples. "I knew he was struggling, asked if he needed help. Should have pushed." Guilt mirrored his own, a shared weight that bound the team tighter even as it frayed trust. Jack volunteered for the late watch again, circling the exhibits under a starless sky. The city lights twinkled mockingly from afar. DC's power corridors, indifferent to the wildlife world's underbelly. His mind wandered to Lisa, how she'd always said his devotion to the animals blinded him to real dangers. "You're playing hero in a concrete jungle," she'd quipped during their last fight. Now, it felt prophetic. Around midnight, his radio crackled, Riley's voice terse. "Harlan, anomaly at the north fence. Motion sensor tripped. Get here." Jack sprinted, boots pounding the gravel path, flashlights slicing the dark. The north section bordered a quieter stretch of the park, less trafficked, trees crowding the barrier. Riley waited with 2 guards, their beams converging on a cut in the chain link. Fresh, precise, like wire cutters had danced through it. "No breach," Riley grunted, a burly man whose marine scars spoke of worse than poachers. But footprints, small, boot treads, and this. He held up a plastic baggie sealed with evidence tape. A tiny camera, no bigger than a matchbox, camouflaged in the underbrush. "Planted to watch us watch them." Jack's pulse thrummed. Surveillance. The ring wasn't retreating. They were adapting, eyes everywhere. "They know our moves." Riley nodded, calling it in. As the team swept the area, Jack stared into the park's maw, the forest a black void whispering threats. Xiaobao's escape had been the spark, but this fire was spreading, exposing cracks in the system, testing loyalties, and pulling innocents into the fray. By dawn, the camera yielded data, footage of staff routines, timestamps matching Ellis's tips. Agent Brennan arrived at first light, his team poring over it in the command post. "They're patient," he told Jack over lukewarm donuts. "Waiting for a slip, but we've got warrants out for Kozlov's safe houses. One more push, and we dismantle this." Hope flickered, fragile as the cub's whimpers. Jack returned to the enclosure as the zoo stirred, visitors trickling in for the morning shows. Xiaobao greeted him with a curious paw against the glass, his eyes bright with the simple joy of routine. In that moment, amid the gathering storm, Jack vowed silently, whatever the cost, he'd shield this little life. The dark forest's shocks were far from over, but the bond forged in its depths would be the light guiding them through. The first rays of sunlight pierced the canopy of Rock Creek Park, turning the dew-kissed leaves into shimmering jewels as Jack Harlan trudged back toward the zoo's perimeter. His boots crunched over the gravel path, each step heavy with the night's revelations, the hidden camera, the precise cut in the fence, the unyielding grip of the poaching ring on the edges of his world. Xiaobao's enclosure loomed ahead, a sanctuary bathed in the soft glow of dawn, but Jack's mind was a whirlwind of questions. How many eyes were on them now? And how long before the shadows closed in completely? He paused at the service gate, Jess nodding to the overnight guard who stifled a yawn behind the booth's scratched plexiglass. "Quiet night otherwise?" Jack asked, his voice rough from lack of sleep. The guard, a young kid named Mike with a fresh buzz cut and a Mets cap, shrugged. "Just the usual. Owls hooting like they're plotting something. But that camera, creepy as hell." Jack forced a half smile. Scanning the tree line one last time before slipping inside, the zoo was stirring, the distant whir of the grounds crew's mowers, the faint aroma of breakfast burritos wafting from the cafeteria, a reminder that life pushed on even when danger lurked. Elena Vasquez was already at the Panda house, her white coat crisp despite the early hour. She looked up from her notes as Jack entered the viewing area. The glass wall between them and the enclosure fogged slightly from Mei Ling's warm breath. "You look like you wrestled a bear," she said, her tone light but her eyes searching his face. Xiao Bao was awake now, tumbling clumsily over a pile of shredded bamboo, his black paws flailing in mock battles with invisible foes. The sight tugged at Jack's chest, a flicker of normalcy amid the chaos. "Feels like it," Jack replied, leaning against the rail. He watched the cub, the way his fur caught the light, soft and resilient. "Brennan says they're closing in on Kozlov. Warrants for 3 properties, one's a warehouse in Alexandria." Elena set her clipboard down, crossing her arms. "Good, but Jack, this isn't your fight alone. The director's talking about rotating you off the exhibit until it's over." Her words hung there, practical but laced with concern. She knew him too well. The stubborn streak that had kept him at the zoo through budget cuts and personal storms. He shook his head, eyes never leaving Xiao Bao. "Can't. He's counting on me." It wasn't just duty, it was deeper. Rooted in those quiet nights hand-feeding the cub formula from a bottle warmed on a hot plate, whispering stories of bamboo forests Jack had only read about. Elena sighed, stepping closer. "I get it. But if they come for you to get to him..." She trailed off, the unspoken fear thickening the air between them. Outside, the first tour groups arrived, their chatter a distant buzz, oblivious to the undercurrents. By mid-morning, the admin building thrummed with activity. Director Harlan, still earning chuckles with his shared surname, had called in reinforcements. A liaison from the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service, a stern woman named Carla Nguyen with a stack of federal regs under her arm. The conference room smelled of fresh coffee and printer ink, maps of the park pinned to the walls like battle plans. Jack sat at the back, nursing a mug that had gone cold, as Brennan laid out the latest. The camera's feed looped to a server in Bulgaria, the agent said, his voice even, projecting a slide of encrypted data streams. "Kozlov's not operating solo. We've ID'd a U.S. contact, import-export firm in Baltimore, fronts for animal trafficking. Gary Ellis was the entry point, but he's small fry. This goes higher. Bribes to port officials, fake permits for research specimens." The room fell silent, the weight of it sinking in. Sarah Klein, fiddling with her notebook, glanced at Jack. "So what, they're planning another hit? Here?" Brennan nodded grimly. "Likely. Ellis flipped more overnight. Said they want the cub alive for a private collector in Dubai. High bid at an underground auction next month. But if they can't grab him clean, they'll improvise." Jack's stomach churned. Dubai, half a world away, where pandas weren't symbols of peace but commodities. He thought of Xiao Bao's wide eyes in the forest, the desperate cling that had pulled him back from the brink. "We reinforce everything," he said, his voice cutting through the murmurs. "Drones, motion traps, no deliveries without triple checks." The meeting dragged into lunch, but Jack excused himself early, drawn back to the enclosure. The crowds had swelled, families pressing against the glass, phones out to capture Xiao Bao's antics. A little girl in pigtails waved a stuffed panda, her mother's voice carrying, "See? Just like the hero story on the news." Jack lingered in the shadows, the irony bitter. Hero? He felt exposed, every face in the throng a potential threat. Elena found him there, handing over a sandwich wrapped in foil. "Eat, and talk to me." They walked the service path behind the exhibits, the air thick with the earthy scent of mulch and animal musk. "It's not just the poachers," Jack admitted, unwrapping the food but taking only a bite. "It's everything. Lisa called this morning, saw the clips online, said it's proof I need to get out, find a real life." Elena stopped, turning to face him. Her expression softened, the vet's precision giving way to something warmer. "She's wrong. This is real. You're good at this, Jack, saving what's worth it. But you can't do it burned out." Her words lingered as he returned to rounds, the sun climbing high and baking the paths. By afternoon, tension spiked. A false alarm at the south gate, a jogger who matched a vague description, sending security scrambling. Riley barked orders over the radio, his gravelly voice a steady anchor. Jack double-checked the Panda house locks, his hands steady despite the adrenaline. Xiao Bao napped now, belly up in a pile of leaves, Mei Ling's watchful gaze following every move. As evening approached, Ruiz texted again. Lead on Kozlov, spotted at a motel off 495. Stakeout in motion. Jack relayed it to Brennan, who mobilized a team. For the first time that day, a spark of momentum cut through the dread. But as he patrolled the fence line, the park's edge calling like a siren's song, a low rumble echoed from the trees. An engine, distant but deliberate. He froze, radio in hand, scanning the green void. Was it them? Testing again. The rumble faded, swallowed by the wind rustling through the oaks. But Jack's heart didn't slow. The dark forest wasn't done whispering its secrets. It was building to a roar, one that would drag the world into its shocking depths. Xiaobao's safety hung by threads Jack could feel fraying in his grip, and as night fell once more, he braced for the pull. The moon hung low over Rock Creek Park, a pale sliver casting erratic shadows through the interlocking branches that fringed the zoo's north fence. Jack Harlan's breath came in measured huffs as he crouched behind a cluster of rhododendron bushes, his flashlight tucked into his belt to avoid betraying his position. The rumble he'd heard earlier had died away, leaving only the night symphony. Crickets chirping in relentless chorus, the occasional hoot of an owl slicing the quiet, and the faint rush of the creek somewhere deeper in the woods. But Jack's instincts screamed that it wasn't over. The poachers, or whoever was pulling their strings, had shown a knack for vanishing like smoke, only to reappear when least expected. He'd radioed Riley about the sound, but the security chief's response was clipped. Stay put. Teams en route from the east gate. No heroics, Harlan. Jack knew better than to argue, but waiting felt like surrender. His mind flashed to Xiaobao, safe in the enclosure under Elena's watchful eye, the cub's trusting face pressed against the glass earlier that day. That innocence fueled him, turning fear into resolve. The fence loomed just feet away, its chain link reinforced with fresh welds after the camera discovery, but vulnerabilities lingered like ghosts. Minutes stretched into an eternity before Riley's flashlight beam cut through the underbrush, followed by two more guards fanning out in tactical formation. The ex-Marine's broad frame moved with practiced silence, his face a mask of grim focus under the brim of his cap. Anything? He whispered, voice low enough to blend with the wind. Jack shook his head, rising slowly. Gone. But it was close. An engine. Idling, maybe. Like they were scoping the line. Riley grunted, sweeping his light along the barrier. No new cuts, no tracks in the soft earth, but the air carried a faint tang of exhaust, acrid against the forest's damp freshness. They patrolled the perimeter for the next hour, the team's boots silent on the dew-slick grass, radios muted to bursts of static. Jack's thoughts wandered to Gary Ellis, the fallen colleague whose betrayal still stung like a fresh wound. The maintenance tech had seemed so ordinary, sharing stories of his daughter's soccer games over cafeteria sandwiches, griping about overtime pay. Now, in the cold light of hindsight, every interaction felt tainted. How many fences had Gary weakened before? How many discrepancies had paved the way for this nightmare? The FBI had him in custody, but his confessions painted a picture of coercion turning to complicity, debts mounting until the syndicate's offer became a lifeline he couldn't refuse. By the time they looped back to the service gate, the adrenaline had ebbed, leaving Jack bone-tired. Riley clapped him on the shoulder. Get some rest. Brennan's got eyes on that motel lead. Kozlov's cornered. Jack nodded, but sleep was a luxury he couldn't afford. He detoured to the Panda house instead, the building's soft interior lights a beacon in the dark. Elena was there, updating charts on her tablet, her posture straight despite the late hour. False alarm? She asked without looking up, sensing his presence. Something, Jack replied, sinking onto a bench near the viewing window. Xiaobao and Mei Ling were asleep. The mother panda's massive form curled protectively around her cub, their breathing a synchronized rhythm that echoed faintly through the vents. The sight eased the knot in his chest, if only a little. Elena set her tablet aside and joined him, offering a thermos of herbal tea, chamomile, her go-to for frayed nerves. Ruiz called. Ellis named more names. A dock worker in Baltimore, someone in customs. It's unraveling, Jack. But they're desperate now. He took a sip, the warmth spreading through him like a tentative thaw. Desperate means sloppy or bold. Elena's hand found his knee, a brief grounding touch. You've been carrying this alone too long. Talk to Sarah or the director. We're a team. Her words carried the weight of their shared history. Nights spent monitoring Mei Ling's pregnancy, the joy of Xiaobao's first wobbly steps. In the zoo's high-pressure world, bonds like theirs were lifelines, forged in crisis and care. Jack murmured agreement, but his mind was already drifting to the morning ahead. Dawn brought a flurry of activity. The zoo opened at 8 a.m. Crowds swelling with curiosity over the Panda adventure splashed across headlines. The Washington Post had run a front-page story, dubbing Xiaobao the escape artist cub, and Jack the keeper who clawed back fate. Reporters lingered at the gates, their questions probing for drama, but the zoo's PR machine kept details vague, focusing on the rescue, not the threats. By 9 a.m., Jack was back on rounds, the sun climbing to burn off the night's chill. The Asia Trail buzzed with families, strollers weaving through the paths lined with faux bamboo that rustled in the breeze. He checked the enclosure feeds on his handheld monitor, confirming Xiaobao's enrichment session, a puzzle feeder stuffed with apple slices and carrots, designed to mimic wild foraging. The cub was at it now, his clever paws manipulating the device with focused determination, black ears twitching at every clink. Sarah Klein caught up to him near the service shed, her ponytail swinging as she jogged lightly. "Jack, you see the viral clip? Someone leaked footage of you carrying him out of the woods? Over 5 million views already?" She held up her phone, the video grainy but heart-tugging. Xiaobao's tiny form bundled in the blanket, clinging even in exhaustion. Jack winced. "Great, now every poacher from here to Dubai knows my face." Sarah's smile faded, replaced by a flicker of worry. "Brennan stopped by earlier. They're raiding the Alexandria warehouse at noon. Wants you on standby. Your description of the truck matches one they impounded." The news ignited a spark of momentum. Jack spent the next hours in the command post, a converted storage room thick with the scent of stale air and electronics. Agent Brennan paced, coordinating with his team via earpieces, his tall frame casting long shadows across the tactical maps. Ellis's info checks out, crates, trank supplies, even forged export docks for live specimens. He glanced at Jack. If this nets Kozlov, it's a domino, but expect blowback. These syndicates retaliate. Noon came with a tense hush over the zoo. Jack monitored from the observation deck, binoculars trained on the park's edge, while Elena handled the public feedings to keep up appearances. Xiaobao performed his usual show, rolling somersaults that drew awes from the crowd, but Jack saw the subtle wariness in his movements, the way he paused to sniff the air. Animals sensed threats, even in captivity. The raid unfolded miles away, relayed in fragmented updates. SWAT breaching the warehouse doors, shouts echoing over the line, the clatter of arrests. Brennan's voice crackled through. "We got him. Kozlov in cuffs plus 2 associates. Warehouse full of gear, nets, sedatives, even a holding pen." Relief washed over Jack, mingled with a surge of vindication. But as the details trickled in, the victory soured. No Panda parts, just tools of the trade, but manifests pointed to bigger players, a shipping magnate in New York, ties to international auctions. The ring wasn't dismantled. It was pruned, roots running deeper. By late afternoon, the zoo exhaled. Director Harlan gathered the staff in the break room, his drawl warm with gratitude. "Jack, Elena, everyone, this is a win. U.S. Attorney's Office is building cases. Extraditions pending." Applause rippled, but Jack felt the undercurrent of unease. Kozlov's interrogation had yielded a name, a high-level importer embedded in D.C. society, attending galas while funneling animals through back channels. The shocks kept coming, each revelation peeling back layers of corruption that tainted the air like smog. As the sun dipped, painting the exhibits in fiery hues, Jack knelt by the glass once more. Xiaobao approached, nose twitching, his paw mirroring Jack's hand on the barrier. The cub's eyes held a quiet trust, unbreakable despite the chaos. But in the park beyond, the forest stirred. A jogger's silhouette, perhaps, or something more sinister. The Clung that started it all had sparked a global unraveling, and though the immediate threat receded, Jack knew the dark held more to shock the world. For now, he pressed his palm flat, a silent promise amid the gathering dusk. The evening air in the Smithsonian National Zoo carried a crisp edge, laced with the fading warmth of the day's sun and the subtle tang of hay from the nearby elephant yard. Jack Harlan stood at the edge of the Asia Trail, his silhouette etched against the floodlights that now bathed the perimeter in an unyielding glow. The raid's success lingered like a half-remembered dream. Kozlov in cuffs, the warehouse stripped bare, but Jack couldn't shake the hollowness gnawing at him. Victory felt provisional, a pause in a chase that had only quickened. Xiaobao's enclosure hummed softly behind him, the automated feeders whirring as Mei Ling nosed at a fresh pile of shoots, her cub tumbling nearby in oblivious play. Elena Vasquez emerged from the vet bay, wiping her hands on a towel stained with antiseptic. Her steps were measured, the weight of the day evident in the slight slump of her shoulders. "He's fine, Jack. Blood work came back clean. No toxins, no lingering stress markers." She stopped beside him, following his gaze to the park's dark fringe, where Rock Creek's trees stood like silent sentinels. "But you're not. Talk to me. That raid. It should have ended this." Jack rubbed the stubble on his jaw, the rasp grounding him. "Brennan says it's just the tip. Kozlov's talking, but only to save his skin. Names a contact in New York, some shipping exec who's been laundering animal trades through cargo ships bound for the Gulf." He paused, the words tasting like ash. The forest beyond the fence seemed to lean in, branches whispering in the breeze, as if echoing the syndicate's reach. "They wanted Xiaobao for an auction, Elena, not parts. Alive, like a trophy. Some oil baron in the Emirates who collects exotics like baseball cards." Elena's face tightened, her dark eyes reflecting the light's harsh gleam. She'd seen the ugly side of conservation before, raids on illegal pet rings in California, where parrots arrived half dead in suitcases, but this hit closer, threading through the zoo's veins. And Gary? He knew about the cubs' value. Fed them everything. She glanced back at the enclosure, where Xiaobao paused his romp to chuff softly at the glass, sensing their voices. The bond there was visceral, a reminder of why they fought. Not for headlines, but for the quiet lives under their care. Inside the admin building, the mood was a mix of elation and vigilance. Director Harlan paced the conference room, his phone glued to his ear as he fielded updates from the U.S. Attorney's Office. Maps of shipping routes cluttered the table, red pins marking ports from Baltimore to Dubai. Sarah Klein hovered nearby, her laptop open to news feeds exploding with the story. Panda poaching ring busted, Hero Keeper's tip cracks case. Views climbed into the tens of millions, the viral clip of Jack's forest rescue now a cultural touchstone, shared from Capitol Hill tweets to late-night talk shows. Agent Brennan entered with a folder under his arm, his suit rumpled from the day's exertions. Kozlov's confirming Ellis's story. The inside man was the opener, but the real architect's Victor Langford, CEO of Atlantic Imports, clean on paper, galas with senators, donations to wildlife funds. Ironic, right? He spread photos. Langford at a D.C. fundraiser, smiling beside endangered species banners, his silver hair impeccable. He's the pipeline, falsifies manifests, bribes inspectors. Pandas, tigers, you name it. Xiaobao was a bonus. They targeted the loan program months ago, scouting weak points in U.S. zoos. Jack leaned against the door frame, arms crossed. So he's still out there? The room's fluorescent buzz amplified the tension, coffee cups scattered like spent shells. Brennan nodded. "Hold up, likely. We've got warrants for his offices. But he's got layers, shell companies, offshore accounts. This shocks the world because it exposes how deep the rot goes. Not just thugs in the woods, but boardrooms pulling strings." The group dispersed with assignments, Sarah on digital forensics, Elena coordinating with Chinese diplomats for Mei Ling's security review. But Jack lingered, staring at Langford's photo. The man's eyes held a calculated gleam, the kind that turned conservation into commerce. It stirred something raw in Jack, an echo of his own regrets. The divorce, the years poured into the zoo while his personal life frayed. "You ever wonder if we're just playing whack-a-mole?" he asked Brennan quietly. The agent clapped his shoulder. "Every case. But moles don't stop digging unless you flood the tunnels." Night deepened as Jack drove home through D.C.'s lit arteries, the monuments blurring past like judgmental giants. His Georgetown apartment felt smaller, the walls closing in with unpacked boxes from the move 5 years back. He poured a scotch, rare for him, but the burn chased the chill, and scrolled news alerts on his phone. International headlines screamed, "U.S. Zoo Breach Reveals Global Black Market," with pundits debating diplomatic ripples. China demanded a full audit of the Panda program, tensions flaring over loan terms. Jack's name was everywhere, Panda Whisperer trending, but the praise rang hollow. Fame was a spotlight on vulnerability. Sleep evaded him until dawn, fractured by dreams of shadows in the forest, Xiaobao's claws scraping denim. By 7 a.m., he was back at the zoo, the parking lot already dotted with early arrivals. Riley met him at the gate, handing over a steaming mug. Langford's offices raided at 5, found emails, direct ties to Kozlov, auction invites. "He's running, but we've got borders locked." The security chief's voice carried a rare optimism, his marine bearing unyielding. Jack headed to the enclosure, where Elena was prepping for the morning check. Xiaobao bounded to the glass, his fuzzy form a blur of energy, pawing insistently as if demanding play. Jack knelt, pressing his forehead to the cool surface. "Hang in there, buddy. We're closing the net." Elena watched from the doorway, her smile soft. "You too. Director's pulling you for interviews today. Good ones to shape the narrative. Show the world it's not just shock, it's a win for the animals." The day unfolded in a whirlwind. A CNN segment in the admin lounge, Jack recounting the Clung in the woods with measured calm, emphasizing the team's role. "It's about protection, not heroics," he said, the camera's red light steady. Off air, the producer pressed for dirt on Langford, but Jack held firm. Facts, not speculation. By noon, tips flooded in. A whistleblower from Atlantic Imports, anonymous emails detailing shipments. Brennan called it a breakthrough, the ring's facade cracking under scrutiny. As afternoon waned, Jack walked the trails alone. The zoo's rhythm a soothing counterpoint. Monkeys chattering, the splash of flamingos in their lagoon. But peace shattered with his phone's ring. Ruiz, urgent. Langford's cornered in a safe house near the Beltway, surrendering peacefully, but he's naming names. Senators, donors. This goes to the top. Jack's grip tightened, the forest's edge visible through the trees. Revelations piled like storm clouds, each one shocking deeper layers of complicity. Back at the Panda house, Xiaobao nuzzled a toy, his world intact. Jack watched, the cub's innocence a beacon. The dark forest had birthed terror, but from its depths came light, exposing truths that would reshape protections worldwide. Yet as sirens wailed faintly from the city, Jack sensed the pursuit's final twist looming, a climax that would test every bond forged in crisis. The tension in the Smithsonian National Zoo's admin building thickened like fog rolling off the Potomac as the raid on Victor Langford's safe house unfolded in real time. Jack Harlan stood in the corner of the conference room, his broad frame rigid against the wall, eyes fixed on the bank of monitors where FBI feeds streamed grainy footage from a SWAT team breaching the upscale townhouse in Chevy Chase. The clock on the wall ticked past 6 p.m., its hands a relentless reminder that the day's fragile calm was fracturing. Director Harlan, still drawing wry smiles with his coincidental name, hovered over Agent Brennan's shoulder, his face pale under the harsh fluorescence. "This ends it, right? No more ghosts in the machine." Brennan didn't look up from his tablet, his fingers tapping coordinates into a secure line. "Langford's the linchpin. If he flips like Kozlov, we gut the operation. Auctions, buyers, the whole pipeline." The room buzzed with low voices. Sarah Klein murmuring into her phone, coordinating with Interpol liaisons. Elena Vasquez reviewing security protocols for the Panda loan renewal, her pen scratching notes with quiet urgency. Jack felt the weight of their stares occasionally drifting his way. The Panda Whisperer, as the headlines dubbed him, now the unwitting fulcrum of a scandal rippling from DC suburbs to opulent villas in the Middle East. Outside, the zoo wound down for the evening, the last visitors trickling toward the exits amid the golden hues of sunset filtering through the exhibits. Xiaobao's enclosure stood serene under the Asia Trail's lanterns, the cub's playful chuffs echoing faintly through the vents as he wrestled with a woven ball. Mei Ling watched from her perch, her massive paws draped lazily over a log, but even she seemed attuned to the undercurrent of unease, her ears flicking toward the service paths. Jack had checked on them an hour earlier, kneeling by the glass to murmur reassurances, his hand mirroring Xiaobao's paw press. The cub's dark eyes had locked on his, a spark of recognition that cut through the exhaustion like a lifeline. But now, pulled into this war room, Jack's thoughts kept drifting back to that forest cling, the tiny claws that had anchored them both to survival. The monitors crackled to life with audio from the safe house, muffled shouts, the thud of boots on hardwood, then a calm voice cutting through. "Victor Langford, FBI, hands where we can see them." Jack leaned forward, heart pounding in sync with the team's held breaths. Langford appeared on screen, a silver-haired man in his 50s, impeccably dressed even in surrender, crisp shirt, no tie, his posture straight as he raised his arms. No resistance, just a resigned sigh captured by the body cams. "You'll want the server in the study. Everything's there. Manifests, wire transfers, client lists." Brennan's team swarmed in, bagging laptops and ledgers, the room erupting in a flurry of evidence tags. Relief rippled through the conference room, tentative claps breaking the silence. Sarah let out a whoop, high-fiving Riley, whose grizzled face cracked into a rare grin. "That's our domino," the security chief rumbled, clapping Jack on the back. But Elena's expression remained guarded, her vet's pragmatism cutting through the optimism. "It's a start, but those client lists, private collectors, auction houses, they'll scatter like roaches." She glanced at Jack, her dark eyes reflecting the screen's glow. "And the diplomatic fallout? China's embassy is already demanding repatriation protocols tightened. Mei Ling and Xiaobao might go home sooner than planned." Jack nodded, the implication sinking in like lead. Home, for the Pandas, that meant the misty bamboo slopes of Sichuan, a world away from DC's concrete embrace. He'd raised Xiaobao through fevers and first solids, watched him grow from a wrinkled newborn to this fuzzy explorer. The thought of losing that daily rhythm twisted something deep in his gut, sharper than the poacher threats. "They belong there eventually," he said quietly. But the words felt hollow, laced with the personal ache of his own fractured life. Lisa's absence, the divorce papers still buried in a drawer. Brennan turned from the monitors, his face etched with the grim satisfaction of a puzzle slotting into place. Langford's en route to holding, preliminary scan, ties to at least a dozen U.S. shipments, exotics funneled through his firm, disguised as cultural artifacts. One manifest lists a panda cub, unspecified, bound for a Dubai estate last year. Not ours, but close enough to chill you. He slid a printout across the table. Names, dates, dollar figures in the millions. Senators implicated in loose oversight, donors who'd attended Langford's fundraisers while turning blind eyes to the cargo holds. This shocks the world because it's not distant jungles. It's here, in the heart of policy. Tomorrow's headlines will bury careers. The meeting broke with assignments. Jack on light duty, Elena prepping medical transfers, the director drafting statements for the press corps massing at the gates. As the group filed out, Ruiz pulled Jack aside in the hallway, her detective's badge glinting under the dimmers. "You did good, Harlan. That forest run, it lit the fuse." Her Bronx edge softened slightly. "But watch your back. Langford's type has friends in high places. Retaliation could come quiet, like audits or whispers." She handed him a new burner phone, upgraded with tracking. "Call if the park whispers back." Night settled over the zoo like a heavy blanket, the floodlights carving stark pools of white against the encroaching dark. Jack volunteered for one last perimeter walk, his flashlight beam dancing over the fences that now bristled with sensors and cameras. The air was cool, carrying the faint metallic scent of the creek and the earthy musk of the exhibits winding down. Rock Creek Park loomed beyond, its trails swallowed by shadow, no longer just a green buffer, but a scarred battlefield of near misses and revelations. He paused at the north fence, where the hidden camera had been plucked days ago, running his fingers over the fresh welds. The forest seemed to hold its breath, branches still, as if waiting for the next move. His radio crackled softly, Elena's voice. "Jack, Xiaobao's restless. Come say goodnight." He made his way back, the paths empty save for the nocturnal stirrings, a fox's yip from the edge, the distant hum of DC traffic. In the Panda house, the enclosure glowed softly, Xiaobao pacing the edge of the viewing glass, his whimpers low and insistent. Mei Ling rumbled a soothing note from her nest, but the cub's eyes sought Jack's, that same desperate spark from the woods flickering in the dim light. Jack knelt, pressing his palm flat. "Easy, little man." Storm's breaking. Xiaobao leaned in, nose twitching against the barrier, his paw mirroring the gesture. The connection was electric, a silent vow amid the uncertainty. Elena watched from the doorway, her arms crossed, a faint smile touching her lips. "He's bonded to you deeper than protocol allows. When they go back, it'll hit hard." Jack swallowed, the reality sharpening. The raid had exposed the rot, but closure meant goodbyes, of a sort. As he lingered, his phone buzzed, a news alert from Sarah. Langford names more, international arrests imminent. The web was unraveling, threads pulling tight across oceans, but in this quiet moment, it was just a keeper and his cub, clinging to the fragile now. The dark forest's shocks had reshaped everything, forging paths to justice and loss intertwined. Tomorrow would bring the final unraveling, but tonight, under the zoo's watchful lights, Jack held the line, one paw print at a time. The first light of dawn crept over the Smithsonian National Zoo, painting the Asia Trail in soft pinks and golds that filtered through the bamboo groves like a hesitant promise. Jack Harlan hadn't slept, his body slumped in the worn armchair of the observation lounge adjacent to the Panda enclosure, the night's vigil etching deeper lines into his face. The raid on Victor Langford's safe house had yielded a torrent of data, servers seized, client lists decrypted, wires tracing millions in laundered funds. But closure felt as elusive as the shadows in Rock Creek Park. Xiaobao stirred in the enclosure below, his small form uncurling from Mei Ling's side, black paws stretching as he sniffed the air. Drawn inexorably to the glass where Jack's silhouette loomed, Elena Vasquez pushed through the door with 2 steaming mugs, her steps quiet on the linoleum floor. The scent of strong coffee mingled with the faint sweet aroma of bamboo wafting from the vents. "You look like you need this more than he does," she said, handing one over and nodding toward the cub, who now pressed his nose against the barrier, chuffing softly in recognition. Jack took the mug, the warmth seeping into his calloused hands, but his eyes stayed on Xiaobao. The cub's playful energy was returning, a testament to resilience that mirrored the zoo's own battered spirit. Brennan called at 4 a.m. Elena continued, settling into the chair opposite. Langford spilling everything. Auction details, buyer profiles. It's a who's who of the ultra-rich. Interpol's coordinating arrests from here to Hong Kong, the rings crumbling. Jack nodded, sipping the coffee, its bitterness a stark counter to the morning's fragile beauty. The revelations had shocked the world overnight. Front-page exposés in the New York Times detailing how Langford's firm had smuggled endangered species under the guise of diplomatic cargo, exploiting loopholes in international treaties. Senators grilled on morning shows, donations frozen, the U.S.-China Panda program thrust into the spotlight as a symbol of fragile trust. Xiaobao's escape, that innocent breach turned viral sensation, had become the catalyst, his clinging paws in the dark forest unraveling a web of greed that spanned continents. But for Jack, it was personal. The betrayal of Gary Ellis, the near loss of the cub he'd helped raise, the quiet erosion of the life he'd built, brick by enclosure. Down in the enclosure, Mei Ling roused, her massive frame shifting with a low rumble that vibrated through the floor. She nuzzled Xiaobao, guiding him toward the fresh pile of chutes delivered under triple-checked protocols, her maternal instinct unyielding even in captivity. Jack watched, a pang twisting in his chest. The Chinese embassy had already signaled intent to repatriate the pandas ahead of schedule, citing security risks. In weeks, perhaps days, Xiaobao would board a specialized crate bound for the Wolong Reserve, traded back to misty mountains where wild kin roamed free. "He'll thrive there," Elena said softly, reading his silence. "But you'll miss the little troublemaker." The lounge door swung open again, admitting Director Harlan and Agent Brennan, the latter's suit even more rumpled. A tablet clutched like a shield. The director's southern drawl cut the quiet. "Jack, Elena, good news dominates the bad for once. Langford's confessions seal it. No more breaches, no inside threats. The U.S. attorneys filing charges by noon, and Fish and Wildlife's drafting new regs for all loans. Your story, Jack. It's the linchpin." Brennan set the tablet down, pulling up a final manifest. Last piece. The Dubai buyer backed out, spooked by the heat. Auctions shut down, at least for exotics. Xiaobao's safe, globally now. Jack rose, stretching the kinks from his back, and approached the glass. Xiaobao tumbled closer, rolling onto his side with a contented huff, his dark eyes locking onto Jack's through the barrier. The keeper placed his hand flat, feeling the faint vibration of the cub's responding paw. Memories flooded. The forest chase, branches whipping like accusations. The poacher's shouts fading into sirens. Nights of bottle feedings when the cub's mules had filled the empty spaces in his life post-divorce. Lisa had texted again at sunrise. Supportive, tentative, suggesting coffee, now that the dust settled. Maybe the chaos had cracked open doors long shut. The team gathered at the viewing platform as the zoo stirred to life. Groundskeepers firing up mowers, the distant chatter of early visitors filtering in. Riley joined them, his buzz cut gleaming under the rising sun, a nod of respect to Jack that spoke volumes. Sarah Klein arrived last, phone in hand, beaming at the latest metrics. The story's virality had boosted conservation donations by 300% overnight. Petitions flooding Congress for stricter trafficking laws. "You're legends," she said, hugging Elena. "All of you." As the morning unfolded, Jack led the final security sweep. The perimeter fences humming with new tech, drones patrolling overhead, AI sensors scanning for anomalies. Rock Creek Park stretched beyond, its trails bathed in light, the dark secrets of the underbrush yielding to birdsong and joggers' footsteps. No engines rumbled, no shadows stirred. The forest, once a lair of peril, now stood as a testament to Vigilance One. Back at the enclosure, Xiaobao performed his routine somersaults for the gathering crowd, the escape artist, drawing cheers that echoed like applause for survival itself. By midday, with the sun high and the zoo alive with families, Jack stepped away for a moment of solitude near the service gate. The air hummed with possibility, the ring dismantled, alliances forged in crisis, a world awakened to the stakes. Elena found him there, her hand brushing his arm. "Repatriation teams arriving next week. You'll get to say goodbye properly." He smiled faintly, the ache tempered by pride. Xiaobao's Clung had sparked it all, a tiny act of trust that toppled giants. In the weeks that followed, the shocks rippled outward. Langford's trial exposed layers of corruption, leading to reforms that safeguarded species worldwide. Jack testified, his voice steady, turning personal ordeal into policy. Xiaobao boarded the flight to China amid fanfare, his crate lined with familiar blankets, Jack's whispered farewell lingering in the cargo hold. Back in D.C., the zoo thrived, new exhibits blooming under heightened care. Jack found balance, coffee with Lisa evolving into tentative steps forward, his bond with Elena deepening into quiet companionship. The dark forest had tested them, but from its depths emerged resilience. A story of one cub's Clung echoing across the globe, reminding all that even in shadows, light prevails. Leave a comment sharing what you thought about this story.